What a lovely morning is this when it starts with a conversation which is about a topic that is close to each one of our hearts, be it a man or a woman. Broadly spoken, it is about a topic which is perhaps easy to summarize as peaceful coexistence. But how easy and how prevalent is that at our homes, in our offices, in the ecosystem we live in terms of the gender? Today, I bring to you another conversation. This one has a focus on one space that is very crucial and very critical to our entire lifestyle. And yet, oftentimes, we measure it in very different parameters and we lose out the main crux of what it is about. People coming together to add value, to bring value to themselves and to the world. Businesses or corporate workplaces are nothing but humans. We are all people, right? What can we do? How can we make this place, the workplace, the corporate workplace, to be more specific? What can we do as a collective, as humans, as men and women, and as every other gender? What can we do to make a space for ourselves that will hold space for each other, that will help us flourish creatively, professionally, personally, interpersonally? What does the gender lens think of corporate workplaces? What are we doing already? And what are we going to do? What can we do? What shall we do? A very, 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 very warm welcome to each one of you who might be listening to this. Today, I bring to you a very eminent panel. I am very excited about it. Frankly speaking, the combination of people we have on board today, I would love to talk to them the whole day, maybe through the night, because each one of them would bring a perspective that's unique, that's educated, that's multidisciplinary, and that comes from academic, from lived experience, from their writing, from their thoughts, from their academic research, whatnot. I'm very excited and I'm very honored to present to you the panel and a discussion, a round table on women and workplaces, some essential conversations. I introduce to you our panel for today without much ado and without any further introduction. So each one of them are beautiful people, and I did not know which order to go with. So I decided I will go the alphabetical way, the safest and the politically correct one. So first I present to you Anjali Hazarika. Anjali is an author, a leadership coach, and a facilitator. And she has some very deep and insightful takes on what it takes to have a peaceful, thriving coexistence at workplaces. I cannot wait to hear from her. Next, we have Kakoli Shen, who's the professor, researcher, author, trainer, and OD consultant. Kakoli also brings a wealth of information, knowledge, experience, and thoughtfulness to this panel and on the table in terms of the gender conversations. And finally, we have Nidhi Shukla. Nidhi teaches young people. What can be a more powerful situation than that? Nidhi is assistant professor in Xavier Institute of Social Service. So we will be all eager to listen to Nidhi and her interactions in the classroom, what she thinks of gender, the young people, the career to corporate movement, and so on. And finally, let me humbly present myself. I'm Shinjini Sengupta. I am the founder of Lighthouse, where I try to teach and run programs for corporates and for individuals for them to have a creative, personal, interpersonal, and professional development in view of gender intelligence, in view of creative leadership, and in view of conscious workplaces. I run sessions, intensive programs in creative storytelling, creative leadership, and generally to bring across a world that will be more creative and that will see the professional aligned with the personal. So first I will come to you, Nidhi. Nidhi, we know that we often confuse, or we often cannot choose between two things that are equally important when we talk about organization culture. That is policy and culture. When we talk about gender, when we talk about diversity and inclusion, we oftentimes think about which is more important. Should we try to advocate for, and should we try to push for policy changes? Or is the crux really lying in our everyday conversations, our everyday culture, the ground, keeping an ear to the ground and making ourselves feel more inclusive from bottom of our heart? Nidhi researches in organization, culture, and policy. And specifically, her thesis is on policies. So I want to ask you, Nidhi, what can we do to translate the policy changes and the policy developments into a thriving, inclusive, diverse, perspective, thoughtful culture at workplaces?
First of all, let me thank you, Sanjani, for that wonderful introduction. It actually sets the tone for the discussion that we are all so looking forward to. So, sitting amongst thought leaders in the specific field, one really wonders as to where to start from. Where do I start from, and how deep do I go? So, because it is a topic and a theme that requires you to go much deeper than what is visible, much deeper than what we think we can talk about. And if at all we go that deep, how do we even come out of it? Because it's all about what the present feel likes, what are the demands of the present, and what is it that the future requires us to do at this particular moment. So much as we would like to think that we work or workplaces are all about what we contribute to the workplace in terms of us being individuals with our own rights, having attributes, behavior, skill sets, responsibilities. So this is what we think of. This is what we would like to think that what workplaces are all about. But it is a totally different question altogether. We are a product of what we are allowed to be, what we have been all along, and what we have nurtured, been allowed to, in fact, first, whether that has been possible for us to nurture or not. And then, if at all, then it is a sum total of not just what the workplace requires you to be, or what you have been taught in terms of the curriculum, or what specifically has been your ecosystem all along. So it is all a composite of so many factors that you run the dangers of getting confused and not emerging into something worthwhile. So that being one of the aspects, we also, and this brings us to this understanding that gender is, whatever we do is actually gendered because of what we have been exposed to and what we have been allowed to live as lived the circumstances. So it's not something that something different I would be saying if I say that much of what we do and contribute to in workplaces is a gendered understanding of it being a construct that has run through an evolutionary pattern, so to say. So when we say that it is a construct, because how do we even come to it? Because we all know ourselves as individuals, as a biological individual, and what we are as social individuals, where the gender construct has come to play a role. So when we discuss gender as a construct, because that is what we are going to be concerned about, where we are contributing to in workplaces, then there is another aspect to it. If it is a construct, then there are two things that come out of it. First is that if at all it is a construct, then it is something that has evolved into. It is something that has picked up bits and pieces from all around and has become a reality. So, and the second thing is that if it is a construct, it can also be deconstructed and reconstructed, isn't it? So if that is a possibility, we can even if we have to and we want to explore those possibilities, there will have to be a need fulfillment that it will have to bring about. They will have to, the society will have to feel the need, the workplaces will have to feel the need, and then you actually work towards or even march towards in a particular direction with this idea of deconstructing something that is not worthwhile, or reconstructing something that is more worthwhile and more suitable to the society, so to say. So who does it? Who does all this deconstruction and reconstruction? And why would even anybody want to do it? Because then you have sets of people who have already accepted it, normalized it, and are in line with it, in sync with it. So then you then categorize the whole society, and then you look into the various aspects of the society in terms of what is useful, what is not useful, what would be good for the future, what would not be good for. So then we will have to actually explore as to who does it and for what purpose, because unless there is a purpose, nothing is really done, whichever way you look at it. So it has to be, since it itself has been an evolution, it has taken centuries to come to what we understand it as a construct which needs to be addressed, which needs to be questioned, or we would not have questioned it anyway if things were allowed to go on the way they were, and they were suiting the society as it is. But it is not. It is clearly not. Okay, so then we need to move towards these aspects, and then we come to these two different paradigms: what is policy and what is culture. Policy is very much structured, isn't it? It is structured, it is need based, it is something that has a particular objective behind it. But culture is something that is evolutionary, isn't it? It is something that is inadvertent, it has been happening, you so many aspects: unconscious, implicit, subconscious, all these are included and are make up the culture. So when these two are in conflict, what is structured and what is not, we need to bring them together in our understanding of what work actually is. So work has also evolved from the two broad compartments of it being reproductive work, productive work, to a composite whole, which is now going to be looked in a holistic way. So when we come to workplaces, we also have the understanding of how women feel about workplaces. So they have always felt all these unconscious biases. We have come across so many terms: unconscious, implicit, subconscious. So this is an area I would also like to explore further, and would like Anjali to come in and explain to us as to how these biases that exist in the workplaces come to play a role in our understanding of it, so that the policies also can be designed in a particular way, and how do they act as barriers, and what is it that needs to be done to overcome these barriers. Anjali, I would much like to hear from you.
This is an important question. And before we dive deep into, unraveling it, I would like us to understand that bias is human. Every brain has a bias. It may be conscious, it may be unconscious. And bias is actually a shortcut to process information or to make initial assessments about people or things, or other people, about people who are different from us. For instance, think about engineers. And common bias about engineers is that they are very good with numbers, they have analytical skills, but they are short on feelings, which is they may be less sensitive to feelings. Bias can be also about age. So when we think about older group of people, often it's said that they are resistant to information technology or IT-enabled services that are applied in the organizations. Now, it may not be true for all people, but it may be true for some people. So is the case with a younger lot of people. We often say that young people don't have the patience to learn new things, and they're caught up in their own world. So when we talk about such biases, it could be about an age, it could be about a profession, it could be about a community. So we first understand that biases are common. Now, when do biases become dysfunctional? When we don't examine them, or we don't make an assessment about how are they impacting our behavior, our actions and interactions, and our decision making. Now, it's well known that women, when we look at women in organizations, in workplaces, the common bias is that women are family focused. Women are family oriented, and therefore they are less committed to career. Now, this bias comes from the fact that women's entry into management has been an event of recent decades. And therefore, and their role has been that of a caretaker and homemaker. But when things started changing, we haven't really examined this bias, that while it was true for some women at some of the time, is it true for all women all of the time? But if you don't examine that, then the bias can creep into recruitment, it can creep into promotions, it can creep into giving women important assignments. Because when you have two candidates who are similar in qualifications and experience, and if it's a man and a woman, a recruiter's bias would be, if I give her a job, if she's single, she'll get married and leave the job. If she's married, she'll take long leave to have babies. And if she is with a family, she is not going to relocate to a new place of posting because she doesn't want to leave the family behind if they happen to be in the same city. Now, this can be true for some women in certain phases of their career, but it can't be true for them at all the times. So each case has to be treated specifically, and every woman doesn't have to be seen as a representative of the whole gender. If organizations want to increase the number of women in their organization, then they have to examine the recruitment practices, promotional practices, succession panels, and see, are we being fair to women candidates who are meritorious and who want to give their best to the job. All right, so this is as far as why the bias exists. Now, how do we deal with it? This was your second part of the question, right? So it will be important to first make the invisible bias visible. How do you do that? By speaking about it, by inviting attention about it, and making people aware about it. Now, say for instance, there is a bias that women have poor negotiation skills. And I came across an interesting research where when women go to purchase cars, the car dealers jack up the prices because they know that women won't be able to negotiate. And when women got to know that, they worked extra hard to shatter that bias and to have the best deal as men can have. So by making the bias visible, women can deal with it. Second is challenge the assumption behind that bias. Another bias about women is that they don't have the crisis management skills, they don't have the risk-taking skills, and they are known for their soft skills. So therefore, we may not like to post them to such critical assignments which requires either crisis management or which requires taking big risks. Now, again, one has to see, have you tested it? Have you tested this bias? Or you're simply branding all women not having these kind of skills? So if you think you have a bias, have a dialogue with the person concerned. Give her enough exposure to such assignments which will expose her to developing risk-taking skills, and then make a decision whether it is valid or not. So challenging assumptions, making the invisible bias visible, and the third important thing is to create awareness about it. And the awareness has to be in a manner that the organizations or the employers have to examine all their practices, all their HR practices, whether they are doing justice to women as candidates. If it's about recruitment, they have to examine, are our selection criteria transparent? Do we have female members as on the recruitment panel? If they're thinking about promotions, are we giving enough chance to women to be considered for that, or we are making decisions based on all the assumptions that we have about how women don't value achievement, women don't want promotions, we don't want to relocate, women don't want to have international assignments. So these are some of the things they have to consider very, very carefully if they believe in diversity and the values that women can bring to the table. And finally, we have to start with 5 A's in dealing with biases. The first one is, as I said, creating awareness about it. The second one is about making an analysis about how are our practices relevant and what can be done to do more. The third is about accountability. Are we holding certain people accountable for meeting the targets of having more women or giving women more promotion? And when I say giving more promotion, I don't mean at the compromise of merit, but I feel that meritorious women should not suffer because of this bias, because they must have equal chance to contribute and bring their best to the job. The fourth thing is allyship or partnerships. We cannot do anything, we can't achieve anything without we have partnerships with men in the organizations and in teams and the larger committees and things like that. And finally is, of course, the action. No point talking about all these things if action is not taken. So if we have to deal with the biases, these are the 5 things I think are very important by which organizations can actually show concrete results.
Okay, interesting input. Thank you, Anjali, for that, because I was always wondering as to how you actually practically and systematically work towards addressing these aspects of biases. Now, this also brings me to another aspect and very important one, where leadership with regards to women is something that needs to be widely discussed, and also an environment created where more women reach the top in order for it to be a more widely accepted paradigm. So, because there are so many aspects, glass ceiling, and then you have the success and likability aspect. So, Sinjini, if I could put this question to you, because I'm really concerned about this particular area also, as to how women leadership, whether or not whether women leadership programs would be a good way to tackle this gender problem at workplaces, and if at all yes or no, how would that become a reality?
Much, Nidhi, for asking me that question, and thank you, Anjali and Nidhi, for bringing in wonderful perspectives on what it really means on the ground and what can be done about it. No problem is a problem without a solution. So thank you for that solution-oriented approach, Anjali. I really learned a lot from that.
Thank you.
2019, Harvard Business Review had brought out a study which studied thousands of men and women across geographical boundaries and across different leadership levels, where they looked at leadership parameters and they wanted to see how, gender-wise people fare in these accounts. Women outscored men in 17 out of 19 leadership parameters. This was a study by Harvard Business Review that came out in June 2019. So it is perhaps not so obvious that women lack leadership skills as a race, as a entire cohort. The styles may be different, and that is what we need to talk about. There is, of course, a huge surge of women leadership programs, and we do see a lot of things that are happening in the corporates, and that definitely is a step in a good direction. But here is something I want to add in this. if women outscores men in 17 out of 19 standardized global high-end leadership parameters, and yet women form 4.9% of the Fortune 500 CEO across the world. Is this really a problem with women? If there is a huge skew in the numbers, there must be more factors to just lacking leadership factors in women. For example, we oftentimes talk about women-oriented workplace skills, and we advise women that, you need to lean in, you need to stand out, you need to raise your voice, you need to learn negotiation skill, you need to learn assertiveness. But do we talk to everybody, and do we want to reflect back on why don't people listen to each other even if they have a quieter voice? Why do we promote a culture of aggression when overall we can be generally emotionally happier? We can be better if we just be a little nice and kind to each other. Of course, while taking care of productivity and workplace, results and orientation of outcome. Instead of telling women to lean in, why don't we ask men also to lean out, to hold space, to amplify the voice, to listen to everybody? I feel there is a huge skew because we are trying to guess, or we are trying to create an atmosphere to say that women are broken, women need to be fixed, and these are the ways in which we can fix women. And the entire budget, whatever is allocated to this D&I, it is in a large proportion, out of proportion, being allocated to try to fix the women. And what we are ignoring in the process is that if every one of us are broken, that is fine. We are not supposed to be like robotic perfect, but system is broken. And that includes the men and the women. The dialogues have to have a two-way traffic. We have to look at the culture because, frankly speaking, let us forget women for a little while now, and let us just look at workplace culture. Do we think we emotionally flourish and thrive in it? Do we think that we have the permission to make creative mistakes? We have the permission to, flourish, and we have the transparency and the openness, and we operate out of love and passion rather than fear? No. And we are looking all around us, and we are seeing so many people who are getting burnt out, irrespective of gender. Women, yes, there are a number of studies and parameters which show why women get knocked out. It can be the glass ceiling, it can be the leaking pipe, it can be the broken ladder, it can be any number of things. Unconscious bias, conscious bias, the figures, the statistics tell us. But there is also a general culture that needs to be looked at, and that automatically will include the women if we learn to be better people. If we learn to be looking at the leadership traits that are perfect and that are going to be applicable for the new generation. I feel that women leadership programs are welcome. That is not a problem. But just to say that you have been given this program and you have been given this, and despite that you could not come up the, what is the scale? What is the measurement scale? What is the parameter? That is something we need to challenge and ask over and over and over again. Because without that, the problems are both internal and external. External, we are doing the studies, the figures are in front of our eyes. But when we are taking steps, when we are putting our money in the budget, we are putting it solely on the women's internal hurdles. As if she cannot, and it's not to say that she has to choose between children and career. Why? Because men didn't have to. Women give their best to workplace. What does that statement mean? Isn't it loaded? Does it mean that she gives any less as a mother to her children at home? Does she have to choose between being a mother and being a worker at workplace? Did men have to choose? I think these dialogues need to get a lot of priority now. Women leadership programs are welcome, but what are we doing with the men? Are we having conversations with the men at workplaces? Are we also talking to them beyond prevention, beyond policies around sexual harassment? Are we inviting them to talk about what do they feel about the women? Do they call the women when they go out for coffee? Do they call the women when they are huddling and going out for a lunch? We need to have these conversations. Without that, plain leadership parameters and putting one more thing on the women, I think that's a little broken. The system is broken, women are not broken. And with that, I actually want to also bring this question to you, Kakoli, that, these things can be a part of the workplace, that, women and participation in the workplace, in the corporate workplace, in different kinds of business. But essentially, people are not born and entering the workplace at the same time. There is a huge history. We are all bred by the society. We are all grown up. We are all nurtured. We are all conditioned by the society. And a large part of that is the academic curriculum, the education system. Since you are sitting really at the center, if I may say so, at this academic curriculum process, the ecosystem of academics, and especially you being a part of the business school, which is perhaps that last, runway from where the plane takes off and starts from the career and ends at the corporate. What do you think of gender sensitivity being a part of the regular mainstream curriculum for students, so that they come prepared when they enter the workforce?
Thank you so much, Injini. First of all, a very heartfelt thanks to you for having invited me to this panel, and with these wonderful co-panelists Nidhi Shukla and Anjali Hazarika. And all that I was listening to these powerful women speak are like opening our own minds. I hope all our listeners are also, sitting with their minds open, because there was a lot of loaded statements that were made here, and they are extremely powerful statements. They need to be looked at, they need to be thought about in that perspective. I'll quickly start with, I'll go back a little, Shinjini. I'll quickly start with what Nidhi initially mentioned, that these are constructs which have happened over the years. And then Anjali also mentioned that these are biases, and biases are natural. They are shortcuts. And then we arrive at a certain situation which is kind of comfortable for all of us, which is convenient. And that is how we start taking things for granted. Let me tell you, I'm sure all of us know that when the kids are born, they do not have any sense of gender. They do not know what is a boy is expected to do, or what a girl is expected to do. How are they different in terms of their skills or strength, mental, physical, etc. They are not aware. It is people like us, parents, society, teachers, all of us, the advertisements that they see, the talk that happens in the house, in the school, that all of them, all of these talks and conversations, and children are like sponge. They absorb whatever they see and hear. And from there comes these kind of, thought processes, which gradually over the years settle down into their minds. And then when they can take decisions, or when they have some sense, then they start practicing them also. You will initially see that, even a 2-year-old boy or a 3-year-old boy is happy to play with all kinds of soft colors or dolls. And equally, the girl could be very happy to play with all kinds of toys and, do all kinds of things that are associated with boys generally. So, but having said that, it is also true that, it has happened. There must have been certain examples because of which these constructs have taken place. Maybe whether it is in terms of physical strength or being able to manage so many things, whether it is the feminine side of men or the masculine side of women. Over a long period of time, these have come into existence. The other side, the other thing that, Nidhi was also mentioning, you talked about culture versus policies. There's a very famous saying by Peter Drucker who says, culture can eat strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If you do not have the right kind of culture, you can make all kinds of strategies and policies. They will be of no use. So these are very, very important statements that have been made. So I want to come back to the question that you asked, that, whether the curriculum has a place. In a curriculum, if you constantly talk, it is, as I said, it has happened or established over a long period. All these biases, all these constructs that have happened. It will equally take a long time to deconstruct them. It will not happen overnight because it has gone so much deep into our own minds, into our own, talks, conversation, ads that you see. I'm sure all of us have seen the Tanishq ad, the recent ad, which had to be taken down, unfortunately. It's so deep into our system. Well, that was an interreligion marriage, but here it is about, even if it is about men, helping the woman to, put the clothes in the washing machine, like the Ariel ad says, but it doesn't talk about the other things. So it will take a long time. We have to be prepared that uh, it is not going to be going away anytime easily. It will go over, it will take time, but we have to be constant at it. In a curriculum, it is more than the curriculum as a subject. If we introduce, it will do limited benefit. We have to look at it as the entire dialogue that happens around it. In the school, the teachers have to stop saying that the girls will go and do the rangoli and the flower arrangement, and boys will go and do the desk arrangement or the more rugged sports arrangements, etc. They can be done according to the skills. If more than the gender, if we start focusing on the skills and the results that they bring in, I think that would gradually take us to what we are aspiring. When we talk about the college level or we talk about the corporate, it is the skills that we need to focus on. And, rather than the gender that we keep on constantly focusing on, women have a lot of other responsibilities because of which they cannot take the workplace responsibility as their mainstream or prime responsibility. Have we asked women, are all women the same? Perhaps there are a lot of women who will not want to take up, but they also need to be told that by doing so, you are kind of, not exploring your skills. Maybe you can be equally be able to do this and that as well. I know so many women who call me and say that, you have transitioned from corporate to academics. We are currently working in corporate. How can we make that transition? So I ask her, why do you want to make that transition? Most 9 out of 10 cases are that, corporate becomes very hectic, and, academics, we want to come back to go to academics because it gives you an easier life. You can do a work-life balance. How mistaken these concepts are. There is nothing called, a very cool and calm and relaxed life in academics anymore. Academics are functioning like any corporate that you can think of. There are equal kind of pressures that you have. It is almost like, you're working in a corporate where you have teaching, where you have administration, where you have all kinds of issues that you would face in corporate. You have peak time, you have lean times. But to say that, corporate academics is an easier job is a complete misnomer. So there are a lot of misnomers that we need to, remove rather than just bringing about a change in the curriculum. You can have a subject, but that subject needs to be there right from the nursery. And rather than a subject, the way you, present it. So it has to be a collective thought. It has to be at the family level. It has to be at the school level, college level, and the corporate level. So that is what I think that is how the change will need to be brought in. Thank you. I hope I've made some contribution to your question. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your input, Kakuli, because your narrative reminded me of a famous quotation by Simone de Beauvoir, who said, "One is not born, but rather becomes a woman." And you just mentioned that as a young child, the child doesn't know what gender he or she belongs to. As we condition the children as they grow up, they learn to adopt what is right for them and what is not right for them. So this brings me to a question to Nidhi. Nidhi, since you are working in a business school and you are an educator, do you think enough has been done to sensitize young men and women before they enter the corporate world? What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you very much, Anjali, for that question. And I was so engrossed in all these discussions that we've been having that I would much love to take cues from all that has been spoken. Like even because I was so much on the same page when Kakali was speaking about all these aspects in education, which can or may not be able to do as much as is required at this point of time. So, as educators, see, I have also been fortunate. It is, let me also disclose at this point that it's not just that I have been an assistant professor from right from the beginning of my career. I have been in this field long back when I started in this field. I was first into school education, and then I moved on through my exposure and the kind of qualifications I acquired, and then I moved on to this position. But then even that has done such a lot of inputs have I collected because of the fact that I have also been a teacher in school where you at some points of time you also felt very helpless because you are bound by the kind of curriculum that is passed on to you from policymakers or from people maybe who have not actually given much thought to how things need to unfold for a child who is to be molded in the school right away. Being in this position at this point of time when I deal with youngsters who are going to move into the corporate world, it again the same kind of helplessness does creep in because they have actually been a product of. And when I was in school and we attended a certain workshop, this is something that I have many a times told people that when I had this attended this workshop on early childhood and care and education, that also brought us to the researches that have been done with regards to babies or the children of that small an age, right from the age 0 to 6 years, which was very crucial in terms of what this child as an individual is going to be in due course of time. There is very little left in our hands after you have actually put that child in a particular kind of an environment which is already given. The connections that has been already made in the neurons are so undoable or so unlearnable that at times it becomes very difficult for that child to actually take further cues from the society and then bring about changes, because unlearning is for all times more difficult than actually learning. So the role of parents, so it all begins with not just the role of parents, even the parents to be. So if we are talking of a society which needs to have individuals who are worthwhile, individuals who are going to be instrumental in actually bringing about a positive environment, we have to address things right from that point of time. Parents who are preparing themselves for parenthood have a lot of responsibility. Those 9 months are important. 9 months onward, the first day the child steps into the world is very important. It's of course your choice. You are placing the toys in front of the child. You always have a choice of allowing both your kids to play with a kitchen set at the same time, with a car at the same time, with any such skill set that you want to develop in your child. Both children need to have that kind of an exposure, right? Because it's a choice that the parents exercise when they are bringing up the child. Now, when the child at the age of 5 years or 4 years, when they is introduced to the school, it has already come with a set of experiences, a set of acceptance, and then a level of acceptability to what it is going to accept even in the school environment. So it all is about moving through various stages and how much of the education the child accepts, which will also fit into the scheme of things that he or she identifies with. So that all this is very complex, and if at all we need to discuss all these things, we also need to understand that it is scientifically required of us to address all these changes. When it comes to the business school, yes, of course, they have to move into the corporate world, and they will have to have this broader understanding of what it requires, what the workplace requires. Because I've already told you, when you categorize work into the reproductive and the productive domains, you have understood that it has to develop, it has to evolve into a composite whole, which is going to be which should have some justification in the overall objective, or the overall business objective of a particular corporate or an industry or any workplace. So it will have to have that kind of a justification, and you need to fit into the scheme of things that you are exposed to. So again, when you when Sanjini, yes, Sanjini spoke of leadership aspects too, where you are speaking of leaning in, leaning out. There is as much space there. That space will have to be filled by people who are optimally able to contribute to it. And again, that will have to be a gender neutral concept, whereby the outcome has to be measured in terms of how well and how much each individual contributes. So all of it is a lot complex, and we have a lot of responsibility when we are dealing with this young lot who's to move into the corporate world, because they should have a very broad-based understanding of work, and also the outcomes, which will have to be worthwhile, not just what you carry along with you as your perception or your bias into the field. So that much about my inputs. Thank you so much for putting that question to me, Anjali.
Thank you. I was just thinking that it is remarkable for women that after all these barriers, they make it to the leadership positions, right? And while we have much to celebrate there, because we see women as presidents of the companies and CEOs, we see women as prime ministers, we see women as heads of institutions and business school. There is also much to be concerned about, that the percentage of women is very, very small. So what happens really? What happens along the way? And I think it will be an important question to ask to Kakali as to what can be done to increase the number of women in business schools, where they can lead their business schools and take it to higher growth. Kakali, what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you so much, Anjali. Thank you. Glad to take this question. So, Anjali, I'll just go back to what I was speaking earlier and continue from there. That when women say that, we want to come to academics, first of all, that's a wrong perception, because if they're thinking that corporate, a corporate life is tougher than academic life, that is, first of all, I would like to dispel that notion. Academics is a very serious job, and you are building characters here, you're building future managers, so it is a lot that needs to go into it. Having said that, I would like to advise, with whatever little experience that I have, to all the women to take themselves a little more seriously when it comes to their work, their careers, their education. They must take themselves a little more seriously and plan their careers out. Just as they plan their babies and families and other things, they must plan a little more in terms of their career. How does that, in an academic field, how it works is, if you've joined an academic institute as a teacher, teaching is something that you will have to do. The other thing is the research. If you are into the teaching field and you are not researching, you cannot be a good teacher if you are only doing, teaching from books or your past experiences. You have to constantly read, you have to constantly research and bring in those research-rich inputs into the class. The third is the administrative responsibilities, the academic administration that comes with it. If you are teaching, there is a program of which you are a part of, there is an institute where you are a part of it. There are certain other things which are done in order to bring in that soft skills, that bring in that the leadership skills, like managing certain things, organizing certain things, planning, leading, controlling, all of those things, which help students develop leadership skills. But all of these are part of the academic administration of any college. So broadly speaking, any college responsibility, any leadership skill will need to have a range of skills that you can display, which includes teaching, research, and academic administration. You are part of the system. You will understand the academic institute the best, and you will do the best for your students. So all the teachers will also have to do research, will also have to do academic administration. You should not try to do one at the cost of the other. If you only focus on teaching and no research and no administration, you cannot really aspire to go very, high. Because then, okay, you may become a good teacher and a good researcher. You should be happy with that. You should be looking at, okay, how do I become the best researcher? How do I lead the research wing of my institute? On the other hand, if you are a researcher and an administrator and a teacher also, you keep on getting intellectually stimulated. You keep on getting trained for, higher leadership positions, and you should not kind of look down upon them, and you should be welcoming them. You should be able to take it along with your other responsibilities, of course, dividing into 30% of each of these you could do. And then if you cannot do, these will help you become, skilled in that. And over a period of time, you will be considered for leadership positions. But if you constantly, keep on thwarting these little responsibilities and look at the prime leadership position, it is going to be difficult for you, because leadership positions in academic institute mean a lot in terms of managing people, managing your external and internal stakeholders. So it is important that you develop those skills. Some of them can be natural or normal, you could be developing them, have developed them already, but a lot of them need to be acquired. And those acquired skills will come only if you take on those responsibilities and take them with full sincerity and be able to do justice to them. So that would be my advice, to look at all of them and do equal justice to them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Having said that, Anjali, I would like to ask you the next question, which is, how do we engage men also in these gender dialogues? We are talking about having a gender neutral kind of workplaces where men and women are not looked at as gendered, but we are looking at more in terms of their skills. So how do we bring in men also in these gender dialogues? Right now also, there is one woman panel, head, and there are 3 women panelists.
Yes,
how do we bring in more men in such dialogues?
Yes, I also.
You got a mute, Anjali.
Well, what you said, Kakali, resonates with me, and I also missed an absence of a male member on this panel, and this is what I'm going to answer now. How do we engage men in this dialogue? By sensitizing them. That is the first thing. And I also feel that tackling gender bias is not the sole responsibility of women. Because all said and done, men are unlikely to see the importance of bias and how it plays out in career advancement of women. And they are not likely to be sensitive to the fact that women have to deal with so many biases that come in the way of their career progression. We have to recognize that fact, because that's something they haven't experienced. That is number one. But I can explain to you this by an example, which makes it very, very clear. This is an incident which was narrated to me by one of my friends. She was sitting at the office and having a discussion with a very senior manager of hers about the prospective employment opportunities for his daughter. He had listed number of companies which he thought would do a world of good to her. She had just finished her MBA. So they, amongst themselves, hammered out the brand and reputation of every company that was there. And while discussing a particular company, she asked her, Do you want your daughter to join a company which has different expectations for women and they are going to treat her differently? And suddenly, sitting across the table of a respected colleague, this senior manager realized two things. The first, that there is an invisible pattern of unconscious bias in organizations. And second, that he himself was unaware of it. But when it became personal issue, the whole thing became very clear. So by talking about taboo subjects such as these, we make the invisible visible. And after this conversation, she could easily enlist him as a champion for women's parity. So women have to do this more. And women have to do this more often with their peers or their colleagues or their direct reports. Whenever they can, they should raise the flag in a non-threatening, non-aggressive way so that we bring in understanding about that issue. Now, the biases are very old because, as I said earlier, that women started working in organizations very late. So have you noticed that our workplaces reflect 21st century challenges, but the societal expectations from women belong to 20th century? You should not travel, you should not leave children behind, and how committed you are to your family if you're doing all this, etc., etc. So this puts tremendous pressure on women. So this is not going to change overnight, right? We all know that. But what can we make things easier for the future generation? And how can we pay it forward, women who are in organizations and holding certain positions? I will touch upon what Nidhi had brought in her sharing, which is about sensitive parenting or new age parenting. New age parents have to groom their children well. Early on, boys have to be encouraged to take on certain responsibilities for the family, which normally fall on girls. Boys and girls together have to be trained for homemaking as well as career making when the time is right. Because these boys, we can't forget, that will grow up and become the spouse of someone or the manager of someone. And if they don't learn to respect people around them, which includes women, they are not going to be get respect themselves. So these seeds have to be planted early on. And this is a job of all the parents, all the men and women too. They have experienced that, but the patriarchy is so deep that many women still keep boys out from these responsibilities. And I have had many workshops where women have got up and talked about it. So as women also, we have a duty to perform. Then if we have to think about the fact that men are partners in creating a change, then we have to have conversations with them at all levels. We have to draw them out and learn from their experience and wisdom wherever they can bring it. They have to be invited in developing family-oriented policies, which are not only good for women, but they are good for the family, and men are definitely a part of the family, and they are also good for the business or for the organizations. Oftentimes, I have seen that anything to do with women's issues, men are kept out. Anything to do with diversity programs, men are kept out. So if they are kept out, when are they going to get sensitized to some of the complex issues that women experience in their career progression? So they have to be invited at every level. Sometimes you will get good results and response, sometimes you will not, but that doesn't mean you give up. And another important point I would like to talk about, that men have to be engaged as key players in creating this change and helping them to understand what are the benefits of introducing diversity, or what are the benefits of having women as team members. Research has shown us that wherever women have been in leadership positions, at the top leadership positions, they have increased revenue, they have created more innovation, and they have been conscious about introducing ethical practices on the board. These are benefits every company would like to have. And this has to be shown through our behavior, through our practice, and we have to role model that. So if men are convinced about the contribution and the diverse perspective women can bring to the table, they would like to invite more women on helping them to facilitate creative problem solving. And I have no doubt that many women have created that kind of a space within organizations. So all I'm saying is, while we're talking about women's empowerment, women's development, it is about including women, but not about excluding men at any point of time. Because in all the discussions, what we have to remember, that gender is the operative word. Gender sensitivity is the operative word. And Kakuli, you talked about developing certain skills which are gender agnostic. So more than giving importance to gender roles, if we initiate gender sensitivity, then we will see that we'll have a very balanced way of dealing with this issue. And it is not women bashing men or men bashing women. That we have to be very wary of. And because we also have to recognize that patriarchy is not a trait of men alone. We have seen it in certain women. And therefore, sensitizing men to the complex issues of women in workplaces is an agenda to be dealt with, rather than waging a war against why things are not right in the first place. So I think we have to engage men at every level in this dialogue.
Thank you so much, Anjali, for that very nicely detailed answer. I, of course, strongly believe that, we have men and women are both equals. Nobody should be brought out at the cost of the other. So I think both of them bring different kinds of skill sets to the table, and we should be aware and we should be welcoming them. So wonderful thought. Thank you so much, Anjali. In fact, when I was working with the corporate many years ago, much younger, and I used to face these kind of barbs, when I would leave the office at a certain time, I would be told, oh, you're leaving now. It's kind of, is it already a day end, etc. So I would understand that, where all is it coming from, that, okay, we are still hanging around, and for you, your family and your, you have to go home. That becomes very important, and you have to go. So I took it for a couple of days. Then I thought of it that, I think it is bordering on, indecency, and it is kind of, bothering me. So I must kind of tell them straight the way I think about it. It's enough of keeping it in my mind. So I turned around and told them, look, when I come to office, I work all the time. Full time, I work. I don't take fat breaks. I don't take juice breaks. I don't take, outside lift, chat breaks, etc. I do my work. I finish my work on time. And I think I'm more effective and more productive than you, who's staying out just to finish his work because he wasn't working the full day. I hope that makes it clear. The office, works for this time, and that's it. I will not neither come early nor stay late. So, all the best to you to do this, but this is my standpoint, and I stuck to that. And I was respected for that also. So I think women need to make a point and stick to that. They need to say it loud and clear rather than taking it low for a long time. But it does take guts to say that. Sometimes you may end up being on the wrong side or on the receiving end. It may not work. I was fortunate that it worked for me, but it may not work in certain other cases, and you may have to, lose out on that. So, Shinjini, my question to you is, how do we kind of, strengthen the emotional culture? How do we bring that strength around? And how do we develop that emotional culture and that, that psychological safety of women and men together in the workplace? So since you've been, working in this area, you're working on sensitizing, if you could please throw some light on this through your lighthouse agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Kapalidi. A lot of the work Lighthouse will be doing and is doing is really about the emotional culture, because at the end of the day, we are all living, feeling beings. We are doing, but we are beings. We are human beings. As I was listening to everybody speak on the different aspects, and everybody also harping on the idea of making it a two-way traffic in conversation, bringing the men into the gender dialogue, which is so important. One line that we often see also in social media these days is that women's rights are not women's rights are human rights. I mean, we often tend to, look at D&I conversations as if it is a minority, as if it is from outside our ecosystem, especially from the point of view of workplaces. It is not. We are ourselves talking about ourselves. I mean, it is a common problem. It is a common solution. It is all of us creating it and solving it. Which interestingly brings me to, one small quote which I read. It is by Chris Anderson, who's the owner and head of TED. So in his book, he writes this lovely line, where he says that in today's time and age, when technology can practically do everything that human beings used to do before, the only way left to be human is to be human. The only way left to be human is to be human. I mean, it is not really a very woohoo kind of a line coming from outside. I mean, think about it. From agricultural age to industrial age to knowledge age to, with the advent of internet. And now perhaps we are knocking on the age of wisdom, where we are actually bringing in our creativity, our ideas. The biggest companies of the world right now, Facebook, Google, all these companies were born in a garage. The world is actually shifting from muscles through brains into the power of one idea. And ideas are not gendered. Ideas come from perspective. And so I feel that we essentially need to look at engagement and creativity at workplace to become a thriving place for productivity. There is this one study also I had encountered last year, which is saying that an average human being brings 1/16 of himself or herself to the world. 1/16. We are not being our authentic selves because the atmosphere, the current prevalent culture at workplaces do not encourage us to be, this kind neighbor, to be this helpful person, to be this engaging person, to be this humorous person. It wants a certain format, a straight jacket, a boxed identity of us, and we are playing by that rule, that famous 5-monkey organization structure that we all study early on when we start working in leadership. But today's requirement is different. This comes from the dean of the London School of Economics, Dame Shafiq. He says that the jobs of yesterday were about muscles, the jobs of today are about brains, but the jobs of tomorrow is going to be about the heart. Exactly the thing Kakuli was saying about presentism, the culture of being longer at the workplace to show that I'm there. And that's a very masculine culture. We have to realize that workplaces have been masculine for decades. And now only we are looking at the shift of consciousness towards the feminine paradigm. Another thing we did not talk about, as much as we talk about equality, I think equity is a word we need to put on the table and look at. what do? We don't feed the same thing to a 7-month-old, to a 7-year-old, and to a 70-year-old. We give them what they need to be able to grow and thrive in their own place, to be able to put their value in the best way. Do men and women require the same thing through the different phases of their lives? No. But we have to hold that space. We have to be empathetic. It is a collective. A lot of the things have been catalyzed by also this lockdown. You know, the COVID situation does have some outcome, and some of them are perhaps positive. Some of them are gendered, some of them are drastic on the gender statistics, but some of them also remind us. We are looking at the fathers who are now 24 hours home and they are with the broomstick out in the balcony, you know, salt and pepper, old people like the patriarch heads of my family. I step out in the balcony in the morning and see them, you know, brooming the balcony. It's just so heartening. I think men are also coming out of the box, and that's a brilliant thing. And women, of course, they are breaking the boxes already. No boxes can box us. We are human beings. We are immensely powerful. And what each one of you said, Anjali, Kakoli, Nidhi, really brought into fact exactly that understanding. As individuals, as parents to little children, as parents to graduating children, as teachers and educators of different ages of children, of students, as workplace heads, as workplace members, as team members, as workers, as mothers, as fathers, let us have these essential conversations on women and workplaces. Let us continue the dialogues while we close the panel today here with these lovely conversations. Thank you, each one of you, for listening. Thank you.